Welcome to Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. We're so excited that you're here for our webinar program today, and we're also really excited to share with you that we're going to be opening our museum for the first time in a really long time. And so next week we'll be open on Wednesday. So if you're from Hawaii, please come and check us out. And if you're watching us from farther away, we can't wait until you can come and visit us here. For our program today, we have several educators from the museum with us behind the scenes to help make this program possible. We have Ford Ebasugawa and Eric Predell, and they are helping to monitor the chat and question and answer. So if you have any comments that you'd want to add to the chat, please do that. And please also add your home location. We like to see where our viewers are coming from. So if you're on the island, please enter your hometown, or if you're coming from another state or even another country. Often, just so you know, we have about 6, 7, and sometimes more than 10 different countries that are viewing. So it's always fun to see where you're coming from. And also we have Ford and Eric are on the question and answer. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask Daniel or Dorinda at the end of the program, please put it in that question and answer, and we'll make sure that they get it. One thing to remember is to please be thoughtful and kind on our chat. Okay, so here at the museum, our mission is to steward America's first aviation battlefield of World War II by sharing artifacts, personal stories, impact and response to the attack on Pearl Harbor that happened on December 7th, 1941, and to the battles that followed in the Pacific region. Today's story is about 2 warriors whose paths crossed because of the attack on Pearl Harbor. We're so grateful you've all joined us today to share in this story of peace, reconciliation, and friendship through the first-hand accounts from Dorinda Nicholson and Daniel Martinez. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Daniel. Daniel Martinez, he's the chief historian at the Pearl Harbor National Memorial. He has hosted Unsolved History for the Discovery Channel, and he's made appearances in over 100 documentaries for television and film. As the chief historian over at the Pearl Harbor National Memorial, he's interviewed 250 Pearl Harbor eyewitness and World War II veterans. And we're so grateful to him for capturing those valuable stories. Now, he is personally connected to the story of the 2 World War II veterans, Sergeant Richard Fisk and the Marine Corps Bugler, and Lieutenant Zenje Abe, the Japanese pilot, both of whom are featured in the story, Pearl Harbor Warriors, written by Dorinda Nicholson. So Daniel, we're so grateful that you can be here with us today.
Well, it's nice to be with you. Aloha to all that are watching.
Dorinda, welcome. Dorinda Nicholson, she was born in Hawaii and is a child survivor and eyewitness to the attacks on Pearl Harbor. Her valuable discussions that have happened since that date really keep the memory of that time alive, and especially for the younger generation. It's so valuable that they know about this event and can learn from it. And a lot of that is because of Dorinda being able to bring it down to a level that young people can understand. So Dorinda, she is amazing. She's been featured in People Magazine, The Learning Channel, Cable One, CBS Sunday Morning News. She's the author of the book that we're featuring today, Pearl Harbor Warriors, The Bugler, The Pilot, The Friendship. And this book in particular has won an IRA award, the ALA Best DVD for Kids. It's won recognition on the Mark Twain list, and it was chosen as Hawaii's first read aloud book, and it was read to 10,000 youths in this area. Also, I had to tell you that Dorinda was so gracious to offer free copies of her book for the webinar viewers today. So after this program, we were going to be sending you the PDF, the digital version of this book, The Pearl Harbor Warriors. So thank you so much, Dorinda. We hope to keep your message alive. And we're so appreciative of the opportunity to work with you. Thank you, Dorinda.
Oh, mahalo to you, Monica, and Eric and vaccine persons. Aloha kako. Because of my age now in Hawaii, you know, I don't know when exactly that age starts, you know, the AARP membership age, but I would be called Auntie Dorinda. So, and I take that as a term of endearment. So feel free to call me Auntie Dorinda. And I appreciate this opportunity to make this history come alive for our students. It certainly is not just for young people or students. This theme of the history and how these men's stories and what they went through and what they learned through this crosses all ages. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dorinda. I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to get started with some background information about the story. So I wanted to just start. A lot of viewers know where we're located, but I wanted to just give everyone a frame of reference. So the story today is about these two warriors who are connected in history here in Pearl Harbor. So we want to make sure you understand where we are located in Hawaii, so you can feel as if you are here yourself. So we had 7 islands, and we are located on the island of Oahu. You can see the teardrop in the center of the map, and underneath the red teardrop, you're going to see waters that are shaped like a tree. So in these waters, that is where Pearl Harbor is. And then if you look closely, you're going to see a small island there called Ford Island. And that's where the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum is located. Let's zoom in so you can see that a little closer. So here, if you were to fly to Hawaii, you would fly into the Daniel K. Inouye Airport, and then you can see Hickam Field to the left of that. And then if you look just right above Hickam Field, and you'll see the words Ford Island right there. So right in the center is the Ford Island, and that's where the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum is located. You'll also notice a red star here. And the red star shows where Dorinda lived as a young child and where she stood witness to the attack on December 7th. And I want to point out one thing in this picture is that you can see here this trunk of the tree in the waterway. This is the entrance to Pearl Harbor where the ships would come in, and the aircraft would come in kind of in the same direction. But I'm going to show you a video of the waterway, and so you can get a feel for where we are here in Pearl Harbor. So please look and listen to the waters of Pearl Harbor. It's quite windy here because the trade winds are back, but hopefully this will help put you in a feeling like you're here with us. And here, if you see this opening, this is the trunk of that water tree, and this is the opening to Pearl Harbor. So next, what I'd like to show you is a reading from Dorinda's book. Now, the Pearl Harbor Warriors story and resulting book is a family collaboration where Dorinda, she's the author. Her husband, Larry, he's responsible for all of the striking images and illustrations. Her son, Greg, translated the interviews. Her son, Jeff, contributed pictures. And then the story itself is weaved through letters between Dorinda and her granddaughter, Jennifer. So the story begins with a letter from Jennifer to her grandmother, Dorinda.
Dear Grandma, I miss you and Grandpa and hope you are fine. Jordan says he misses you too. Thank you so much for sending Great Grandma's jewelry box. It is the most wonderful present. I love looking at it and holding the pins and necklaces she used to wear. My favorite is Remember Pearl Harbor pin, where there is a small pearl instead of the name Pearl. Did Great Grandma wear it a lot? Remember you said you would tell me stories about her. Would you tell me about her pin also? I can't wait to get your letter, Grandma. Please hurry and write. Love, Jennifer.
Yeah, I know that that pin has special meaning. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I know you have it with you today, and I think our viewers would like to see that.
In the book, you'll see a jewelry box, and in the box, the pin that Jennifer was excited to see. Remember Pearl Harbor. Whoops. Let me hang on to it a little bit better. Are you able to see it? Where the word pearl, there would be an actual pearl. The actual pearl must be at the bottom of Pearl Harbor in an oyster. But the pin actually would have an actual pearl. So remember, then the actual pearl, Pearl Harbor. And the women wore these. The women wore sweetheart pins, remember Pearl Harbor pins, and it was a way to honor your son, your dad, your cousin, whoever was fighting in World War II. But as you will see in the book, it was to remind us of what happened at Pearl Harbor and to remind us and the young Marine you're going to meet to hate the Japanese.
Thank you, Dorinda. Dorinda, just one more time, if you could hold the pin up on the left side, because your name is on the right side. So just to make sure everyone had a chance to see that.
Is it my left? This
Yes.
is my left. Do I need it to be my other left? This one?
Yes, that's it. That's beautiful. And the fact that you have been able to keep that for so long.
Absolutely. And I'm going to get a pearl for Christmas.
Wonderful. So this is a picture from the book of the pin and the jewelry box.
Yes.
Now, another picture that you had in the book, I know, I believe that this is a new picture that was added to the paperback copy of the book. But previously you had a hardback copy, but now this is the soft copy. And I know that this was a special edition. Can you tell us a little bit about this picture?
This edition was put together for September 2nd, the 75th anniversary of the signing of the surrender document on the USS Missouri. And so since I was needing to go from a hardback to a soft cover, I wanted especially to document that ceremony. And so many of us, when we see it, we only see the picture of MacArthur and him doing his very short speech. And then we see the Japanese delegation in their elegant, very formal dress, but we have no idea. And I wanted to pull the camera back so that you could really see the magnitude of this ceremony. And there were thousands and thousands of men who were eyewitnesses. And then overhead, hundreds of airplanes, but the airplanes deafening noise. And then in service and attention to the USS Missouri was Richard Fisk's ship, the West Virginia, which was sunk that morning with bombs and torpedoes, repaired and raised. And Eden was at Iwo Jima, and through the rest of the war and that day on September the 2nd. So in showing that ceremony, then these men that you meet, and Daniel certainly can attest to this, these veterans that you meet, they become like your older father and all. And yet now that I'm reading these books, I realize I'm now their age when they were veterans, new veterans to me. So I kept a friendship with several of the veterans and had the opportunity to visit Mr. Abe in his home in Tokyo, and we became his house guests. So we're sitting here in his living room. He's holding up a copy of the Pearl Harbor Warriors book, because I had asked him to write a letter of friendship to the children of the world. And so he's reading it and we're recording it. And then I said, Mr. Abe, would you please sign a letter of peace and friendship? So he did, and I included it in the back of the book. And it's signed in both English and in Japanese. And he signs it, your friend, Zenji Abe. And in the letter that you read, where it's the long letter, I love some of the words that he ends with of how important it is for us to understand each other's cultures.
Yes, and so that's why you're analyzing your book in this webinar today, I think is so appropriate for the anniversary that's coming in just a couple of weeks for us. So I wanted to start by just giving everybody a little bit of background information about the characters so they can, before we try to figure out how they came to a peaceful relationship, they'll understand who they were. So first, I wanted to introduce the bugler, Sergeant Richard Fisk. And the words that I'm going to be reading from is from the foreword. The foreword of Dorinda's book was written by Daniel Martinez, so these words will be very familiar to him. So Richard Fisk began his life in Massachusetts. His dream was to join the military. He and his high school buddies joined up together, enlisting in the U.S. Marines, joining a proud family committed to military service. His father was in the Navy, and his brother was in the Army at Schofield Barracks. Fisk also dreamed of adventure and travel when he finished boot camp. He was assigned to a ship stationed in Pearl Harbor. The family was now all together in a place called Pearl Harbor. So next, I'd like to introduce you to the Japanese pilot, Lieutenant Zenji Abe. Also words from Daniel's foreword. Zenji Abe grew up in Japan. As a young man, he was educated at the top naval academy in his country, at Tajima. When he was a child, he dreamed of flight. The vision was realized when he trained to be a naval aviator. This skill and his dream would bring him to Pearl Harbor. So on Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941, these two young warriors were swept up in a tragic moment of history. So I wanted to share with you something from Dorinda's book, but I wanted to also share with you this picture from our museum here at Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. As soon as you walk into our gallery at Hangar 37, you'll see a painting by Drew Blair, and this is of Ford Island. So you can see the Aichi Val dive bomber here on the top left, and you can also see me pointing to the USS West Virginia, the ship where Sergeant Fisk was stationed. You can see this here on the right-hand side, and this was the position on the morning of the attack. So here I'll be reading a passage from the book to give you a sense of what Sergeant Fisk was feeling on the morning of December 7th.
Early on Sunday morning, on the 7th of December in 1941, a teenaged Richard Fisk stood erectly on the quarterdeck with his shining bugle posed in position to sound another call to orders for his shipmates on the battleship USS West Virginia. Just as he pressed the bugle to his lips and sucked in a deep breath, his eyes caught the brief glint of an airplane as it sped directly towards him. As the plane rushed closer, Dick wondered why the pilot was not pulling up and away from the ship.
So hopefully it gives you a sense of what Sergeant Fisk was feeling. So on December 7th, 1941, Lieutenant Abe flew a dive bomber from the carrier Japanese carrier Akagi. And this is a picture that's featured in Dorinda's book. So Lieutenant Abe flew from his carrier to a target in Pearl Harbor. And so I'd also like to let you listen to some words from Abe in his own words to tell you what he was thinking on the morning of that flight.
During my training at Tomitaka in mid-October 1941 that I was informed of the Pearl Harbor attack plan.
それを知った時にあなたはどんな気持ちになりましたかという質問をたびたび受けますけれども、そうであったかというふうに特別な感動はなかったんです。
And I have been asked many, many times what was my reaction when I heard about the plan. In fact, when I was told about the plan, I reacted unemotionally, simply saying, so that's what this training has all been about.
それは1931年の満州事変以来10年間、日本陸軍が中国本土で無駄な戦争を続けて、日本の国力は消耗し、国民は生活に困窮していましたが、日米交渉が進展しないので、非常に暗雲が垂れ込めたような雰囲気でありましたから、何か大平原が起こるのではないかということを肌で感じていたからだろうと思います。
Having known of the Japanese Army's war in China for 10 years since the Manchurian incident in 1931, I had witnessed Japan wasting its resources on war and our people having a very difficult time. And then at the same time, the diplomatic negotiations between Japan and the United States seemed to be going nowhere. So I had a sense that some big event would happen sooner or later.
I hope that that helps give you a sense of Sergeant Fisk and Lieutenant Abe and what they were thinking at the moment before the attack happened. So next, I wanted to show some quotes. And these quotes are from some of the letters that were written between Auntie Dorinda and her granddaughter Jennifer. And they were more insight into what Lieutenant Abe was thinking when he was called to make this attack on Pearl Harbor. And I'll read those to you. Japan was a poor country in 1941. The Japanese people were suffering and trying to solve this problem. And so our two countries went to war. My life then was to defend and help my country. And then in another part of the letter, he said, I was not excited, nor did I feel fear. I was calm, and all I cared was to follow orders. So this picture here is a picture of Lieutenant Abe in his aircraft, and this picture was shared by Daniel Martinez. So Daniel, I was wondering if you could fill in a little bit of the history of Abe and the attack and how he spent the rest of World War II.
Well, he is one of the, I guess, luckiest men in the world when you consider how many Japanese aviators were killed throughout the war, and especially towards the end of the war, because of our, aviation superiority, both by the Navy and the Army. We were inflicting heavy losses against the Japanese, starting in the Solomons and working our way towards eventually Tokyo. The plane he's standing before was, an incredible aircraft for the time. It is similar in its pattern and design to the German Stuka. And these bombers, these dive bombers, were precise. They carried a high velocity bomb, single bomb underneath the belly of that plane. And try to imagine that aviator so skilled that he would drop that bomb like it was throwing a dart. and be able to have a precise hit. They were highly trained, both the dive bomber pilots, the horizontal bomber pilots, the torpedo pilots, and the fighter pilots. You probably had the best naval aviators in the air over Pearl Harbor on that day, as recorded by history. This particular aircraft was loved by Abe. He talked of it fondly. It carried an additional personnel, a rear gunner, radioman in the back. And you can see this photo is out of his collection, and he signed this for me. And you can see the other planes in the background. And so when the 350 aircraft were launched, they were in two groups, but separate waves. Can you imagine that island that you were shown, and to think that that many aircraft, not all at one time, but a duration of 2 hours, was over this island, precisely hitting every airfield so that we could not offer up any resistance, and then another group moving on to take on the Pacific Fleet. It is the most unbelievable event when you consider that 6 Japanese aircraft carriers came within 230 miles of Oahu and launched at 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. that morning, 2 waves of attack. Dorinda shares something with my family as well, because my mother was 10 years old, and she had just had a hula lesson the day before with Hilo Hattie at Kapulani Park, and my grandfather was right in the middle of it in Pearl Harbor as the shift for all the workers from Red Hill met very close towards Mary Point Landing. And so Dorinda and I have talked about this. My mother went to Sacred Heart School, and we shared a lot of ideas. And it was so nice that Dorinda invited me to be part of her adventure with this book. And I certainly thank her as these years have gone by, because it provided the young people who came to Pearl Harbor with a book that they could clearly understand, and also feel that they knew Dorinda because of her age and what she witnessed. And so I think that when the National Park Service, of which I work for, when this book went into the bookstore, it was something that was needed for many, many years. And we're so glad that it's still in print, and still people, buy this book for their children, or the children ask for it, and share that tragic memory, but to also celebrate the friendship of 2 warriors that became brothers.
And speaking of the other partner in that relationship is Sergeant Fisk. So we heard a little bit about Abe and what his participation was on the day of the attack. And I know that he actually, later in the war, he became an American prisoner of war. Is that correct, Daniel?
Zenje Abe?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he was involved in the later actions and was shot down on a small island north of Saipan. And he was a senior officer, and believe it or not, he was the one that surrendered the island to the Americans because he was a senior officer. Mm. And then I see this picture of Dick Fisk, and all I can say about Dick is I recruited him as a volunteer. I was in charge of the Volunteer in the Parks program in about 1985. His heart was very bitter. He had lost most of his platoon on an island called Iwo Jima. And he said he didn't think he could do it. Now, there was a very large Pearl Harbor survivors organization here in Honolulu. And I coaxed him, and I can just share this one story. Dorinda knows this story. He was on the memorial, and I wasn't with him at that time. And a older Japanese woman came up to him and said she was sorry. And he was taken back from that. The problem that Dick was having was that he had hatred for the Japanese because he had been in these very, very difficult battles and had seen the worst of war. And as one author called it, a war without mercy. And he said to me that that was the first time he saw the Japanese as human.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. They both experienced some of the perils of war, and that's why we wanted to share some of those stories, is so people could understand what they were doing on the day of the attack, but also what transpired for each one of them through the other years that remained in World War II.
If I could just add one thing, how did Zenji Abe come to know us? Well, in 1983, approximately 20 Japanese aviators made an unannounced visit to the USS Arizona Memorial. And that was before I was there. And I got the story that the pilots had come to pay their respects to the dead of the Arizona. And they weren't sure how they would be received, so they came unannounced. The superintendent at the time, Gary Cummins, heard of this, and he rushed to meet with them. They were welcomed, and they went into the theater and brought them all together and recorded their memories as a group. That was the beginning of reconciliation with the United States government by these pilots coming to this national park that was, at that time, 1983, it was only 3 years old. The Navy had operated the memorial prior to it. It was established as a national park in 1980. Zenji Abe was part of that group. And from that, when we had the next reunion that took place 5 years later, I had the opportunity, because of several people that knew the pilots, and I'm losing a name here for a moment, but certainly Mike Winger was one of them, and a gentleman that lives here on the island, I'll think of his name in a moment. Without those two individuals guiding us through this process of getting to know these aviators and becoming invitees to the ceremony and friendships being exchanged, this is when Dick Fisk had the opportunity to meet Zenji Abe.
So hopefully by now everyone can get a sense of the two men that are main characters in this book. So Sergeant Fisk and Lieutenant Abe. So Dorinda, you'll have to check out her book, but she does a great job of developing those characters so you can really capture the sense of who they were and how they were feeling. Some of these, I wanted to share some more pictures from Dorinda's book, and they show some of the things that she spoke of earlier in the program. So here is a picture of the surrender on the USS Missouri. Dorinda, would you like to share some more about this?
Yes. You see the Japanese delegation there, getting ready to do the signing, and they're facing the desk. One is signing actually right now. I want everyone to go to the USS Missouri, and on that top deck, you will find a big bronze seal that reads over this plaque, and that's where the treaty was signed that day. So when you stand there, imagine, look at the guns and look at the men, and then you see officers immediately to my left, standing there at attention. We also forget that other nations signed that day too. And the Missouri had 3,000 men assigned to her, and I think every one of them is hanging from whatever place they could squeeze them. There they are. And at the ceremony, September the 2nd, just 10 weeks or so ago, the USS Missouri sent out an invitation to anyone who was on board in Tokyo that they would bring them to Pearl Harbor. And 56 RSVP'd and said they were coming. So of course they didn't get to come, and these books were a gift for them, and the books were sent to them. But the memory of standing on this historic place equals probably no other event in their life, except maybe the birth of their children. And you can experience that too when you go on board the Missouri and stand in that very same spot. So in 2000, Larry, my husband, and I went for a ceremony on, that was the December 7th time. And in the book, there is a picture of the Japanese delegation and the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, and they reach over that bronze seal on the floor and they shake hands, and then they sign a flag for both countries. But such a momentous event to the day that America joins into war, and that the day it officially is over by just some scratching on a piece of paper that ends the most savage event in all of the 20th century for us.
Oh, Dorinda, thank you for that explanation. And actually, I wanted to stop sharing the picture because thanks to our friends on the Missouri, they allowed me to go on board even though they were not open yet. And I was able to capture a little bit of the video from that time. So I want to show a little bit, not of the time of the signing, but of the location.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at that so everybody can get a sense of what it looks like now. So here is the deck that you saw in Dorinda's picture. And you can see the guns here. And then this is where a lot of the sailors were standing. And if you look here, you can see the Arizona Memorial at the bow of the ship. And then you can also see the bridge to Ford Island. So imagine yourself standing on the USS Missouri, and you turn and you're facing here. This is Pearl Harbor. So you see the ships are in the harbor, and then you can see the shipyard where all of the cranes are. So you're standing in the same location. And then Dorinda mentioned the bronze seal that marked the place of the table where they were signing the surrender documents. And then I wanted to show you one more thing, because what Dorinda mentioned was the surrender documents. They were signed, and yes, that one piece of paper that ended such a terrible war was signed, and you can see at the bottom there's pictures of all of the different countries that signed these surrender documents. So these are the officers that were signing the surrender documents on that day. And then we'll just have one more look at the surrender deck and the bronze medallion. So thank you, Dorinda, for bringing that to our attention and reminding us of what happened on that day. I wanted to take us back to your book because I wanted to share a little bit more information that comes from the story that you share through the letters with your granddaughter, Jennifer. So the story itself is weaved through these letters that you write with her. And this one here has a picture of one of the Japanese dive bombers, and it really had an impact on Richard Fisk's life. And the reason why it was so hard for him to find peace with the enemy that he had from the war. Can you explain this a little bit, Dorinda, from what you know of the story?
On the morning of the 7th, Richard was the bugler, and the bugler's job is to call for colors. It's 7:30-ish on that morning, so he's up on the bridge, and he's going to blow da-da-da-da-da-da reveille, and then the flag is to go up, and out of the corner of his eye, he sees an airplane coming towards him, and his first reaction is like so many others that morning. Why is that airplane flying so low? How dare that American pilot come in here like that? I'm going to get the number off the tail. I'll court-martial him. But the plane comes closer, releases its torpedo. And because Richard is so high up in the plane, the airplane at eye level for both of them, he sees the face of the pilot. And that becomes a part of his nightmares that is very hard for him to sleep. He doesn't really want to share that he's this big Marine having these nightmares. And he's just fine then going to fight at Iwo Jima, the bloodiest battle. And he's fine going to Korea. And then he goes to Vietnam, all these years of service. But something was really eating at him. And he had to find a way to forgive and forget.
And so I believe that his ability to do that was from the story that Daniel shared about the Japanese woman that he met while at the Pearl Harbor National Memorial, that that was the moment. Was that right, Daniel?
And that certainly was the beginning. None of this would have taken place had it not been for John D. Virgilio, which I was somehow forgot his name. Without John D. Virgilio reaching out, and he can speak Japanese as well, he's a former school teacher here in Honolulu, he brought these groups together, and we facilitated that within the National Park Service to bring these warriors together. And the beginnings of this started after the 50th anniversary. Now, there had been meetings taking place, but they were very casual and not formal. The formal meetings started, and in fact, I attended a dinner that evening after December 7th, and they had both veterans from the United States and aviators, and some of them sailors on the ships, had dinner together, and I was there for that. And it was so strange, I thought, that a pilot that attacked one of the sailors was at that table with them. And this was the beginning of an incredible reconciliation moment. And you can see right here, which is featured in Dorinda's book, that Zenje Abe and Dick Fisk became close friends. And when they were together, when he came to the islands, that is Zenje Abe, he would meet with Dick, and they would go out to the memorial and bring roses, 2 roses, one for Japan and one for the US, and go into the memorial room and lay it before the names, and Dick would play taps. And when he did that ceremony, you can see it right here. When Abe was not here, he would play Japanese taps as well. And it was the beginning of an incredible moment in which an embittered Marine who had fought on Iwo Jima now was honoring his enemy and considering Zenje Abe his brother.
So I know, Dorinda, you captured a message of peace and a little bit of video of what Daniel's describing. And so I wanted to show everyone about this trip that you took to to Abe's home in Japan. So 1 minute, I will pull up that video.
It was during my training at Tomita.
Thank you for your patience in waiting for me.
Children can learn from the mistakes of the past and maybe teach their country how to spread peace all over the world. There are many countries in a small mother Earth. We need to recognize each does have its own history, culture, and customs. It is most important we work together to understand each other. Your friends, Zenji Abe.
Our friend Richard Fisk, the bugler from the USS West Virginia, has his own special way of remembering those who died on December the 7th. Once a month, he goes to the USS Arizona Memorial and has a very simple but eloquent way of remembering. Let me ask him to tell you about it.
To help me with this ceremony today, we fought a vicious war. We both suffered a lot. And yet, we can put all of that aside and become very sincere friends. And I think this is the way it's supposed to be.
I wanted so much to share this story with all of you, and thank you for letting me do that as a Pearl Harbor child. Aloha.
It's so sad that that bugle is silent now, but because of you and the Aviation Museum educating and preserving this history, that bugle does not need to be silent anymore.
And thankful to you and your husband, Larry, for capturing that moment for us so that we can all continue to watch it. And so our viewers know that Dorinda has posted this video on her website, pearlharborchild.com, so you can see this message of friendship and peace even anytime.
And thank you for Daniel, who year after year after year preserves these stories.
Yes, I want to. It is. I want to share another picture that I found with our viewers. And maybe this picture, Daniel, you can describe more about the relationship that developed between these two men. You told us a little bit about how Abe came with the other pilots in the 80s, and then about how Richard Fisk and Zenji Abe met in the early 90s. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how their friendship developed?
Well, this particular picture, believe it or not, was taken in Guam. And this was a trip that we made out there for one of the anniversaries. This is Everett Highland, who was really literally left for dead in the Naval Hospital. They didn't think he'd make it. He was on the USS Pennsylvania, which was the flagship of the Pacific Fleet. It was in dry dock number 1 at that time. And he and Abe also became close friends of the Pearl Harbor survivors. And Everett Highland was a very, very special individual as well. This culture of friendship that started with Dick Fisk spread out to many of the Pearl Harbor survivors. And, you know, the notoriety of that attack and, you know, the fact that we immortalized that with the pin that Dorinda showed you at the beginning of the program, Remember Pearl Harbor. This is another vision, both of Abe and Everett Highland and Dick Fisk, of another metaphor for remembering Pearl Harbor. And that's for the brotherhood and the individual decision to leave the war and its terrible consequences behind and look forward to the peace and the fact that these individuals survived and they made it through the war where so many didn't. And for Everett, it was he was with the antenna repair company or section on Pennsylvania. He was the only one to survive out of that group. Mm. So when I look at this picture, Everett being a volunteer, several of the Pearl Harbor survivors, including Dick Fisk, volunteered and met with the visitors on a daily basis. And it was one of the highlights of the visits for many of them to actually talk to somebody that was there. And on the occasion of the anniversaries, Zenje Abe always returned. And he brought with him many of the aviators in the later years. And so we had that experience. So John DiVirgilio, without his guidance of working with us and Dorinda and bringing these groups together, these two enemies that became friends, that story never would have been told. And it probably wouldn't ever have happened. But it did. And we have this hallmark of remembering several of the Japanese aviators and all our Pearl Harbor survivors that came to the memorial over the years and volunteered over the years. At one time, we had 17 Pearl Harbor survivors volunteering at the memorial.
What I really loved about this picture was that Fisk had been the inspiration for other people to become to allow a friendship to even happen. And I think what I read in Dorinda's book, and Dorinda, please elaborate on this, but I believe Abe said something about how he wanted to touch the hands of as many veterans as possible. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, I think that was actually a Daniel story about him wanting to shake hands and touch as many veterans as possible.
Yeah. What happened is John DiVirgilio worked with the National Park Service to coordinate our symposiums and invite the Japanese aviators along with the Pearl Harbor survivors. And we put the first ceremony together, and there was a whole culture to it. If I can take just a moment, we didn't know how to do it because the Pearl Harbor survivors were going to shake hands. Well, who was going to step towards who? And in formalizing it, the victor goes to the former enemy and opens up his hand to shake with the former enemy. And that is a protocol in Japan. And so that's how this handshake started. If you go to the Cemetery of the Pacific at Punch Bowl, you can walk up to the overlook and you'll see a plaque that was placed there commemorating this handshake between these two former enemies. And so it was formalized in 1995 on the anniversary of the ending of the war, and both Japanese and American veterans came there to remember that day. And that plaque was formally established. Over the years, when we had the teacher conventions that came as part of a National Park Service and Pacific Historic Parks and Dorinda, you were involved in those. We would bring all the teachers, and we brought students, and eventually teachers from Japan, students from Japan, along with American teachers, and we would take them to the place of the handshake, which is commemorated as a handshake between Abe and Dick Fisk. So it has this elasticity of honor, and its story lives on. And there's probably many of the folks that come to Hawaii, and even some of our park rangers don't even know that exists, but now they will, and people can go up there to see that. And that was one of the things that Dick was very proud of, and I think Abe was very proud of, that symbol of the handshake was so important to them, that they could put the war behind them, but also celebrate the peace and friendship.
They sure were the example to lead that legacy of peace. I have some questions from our viewers, and David is asking, he wasn't sure, but did you say if any of the other Japanese aviators are still alive?
You know, I don't know if any of them are. I can check, and the person that I know would know that would be either John DiVirgilio or Mike Winger. I can check, and I can get back to the Aviation Museum.
All right, and we'll let you know that answer. So another question was, do you know the location where Fisk's battle station was on USS West Virginia when the attack on Pearl Harbor happened? Where was he standing on the ship?
If you look at the cover of the book, you can show it to them, Monica. It is about where the P is in Pearl Harbor. Go just a little bit left. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
We had a bird's eye view.
Yes, unfortunately. So, so I have some other questions. These are some specific questions. This one for you, Auntie Dorinda. Denny is asking, your home in Pearl Harbor, was it near the Pan Am Airways base in Pearl City?
Absolutely. Mom worked there. And that's why we went to live there, so Mom could walk to work. And so in order to fly to Hawaii during that time, you didn't land on concrete. You had to come on these huge sea clippers, and you landed on the calm waters of Pearl Harbor. And an interesting fact, or little known fact, is Pan Am then would dock their airplane at a wharf, so to speak, or water dock. Not one bullet hole in any of the Pan American planes, which were, adjoin the harbor. So obviously the training, they knew those were not military planes.
I have another question. This one is about the surrender documents. So the question is from Bill. Who was the representative who signed on the wrong line, and was it Bruce Fraser?
Daniel?
Oh boy, that's Stump the Ranger stuff. I know that there was someone that did that. I thought it was a representative, and I'd be guessing right now, the representative from New Zealand. I don't know why I think that, but if I'm wrong, but I'd have to look that up to make sure. But yes, there was a person that did sign on the wrong line. Do you have it?
No, well, I've got, Bruce Fraser he's signed on the correct line.
Well, they have to remove the document, get a new one.
Missouri has entered in on the chat, and so thanks to our education officer on USS Missouri, Dan Parsons. It was Colonel Lawrence Moore Cosgrave from Canada.
From Canada. Very good.
Okay.
All right.
Bruce Fraser was United Kingdom.
My
All
apologies.
right, so now we know.
So thank you to our friends on the chat. So we are running a little bit out of time, and we answered a lot of our questions during the program. We do have 2 more questions. One was about the pin, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but the meaning behind the Remember Pearl Harbor pin seemed to change over time. So
It
can you-
did. I love the meaning that Daniel just mentioned, but during the early part of the war, it meant we made fun of the Japanese and we did caricatures of them with great big Coke bottle glasses and cartoons and movies and put 130,000 Japanese in internment camps. So yes, that was also a part of it.
Mhm.
But certainly that has been changed, and we are such good friends with the country of Japan. But war, Richard Fisk said war is hell, and it is not glamorous, and I don't want kids to think it's glamorous. I don't want them to think we're heroes. We love our country. We're doing and fighting for what we believe in. To me, this is exactly what Richard says. My heroes are the moms that stayed home, the wives that stayed home, the women who went to work and built airplanes and gave us so that we were the best supplied army in the world because we weren't bombing the plants that were repairing ships or making equipment for us. He says the women at home, those are the heroes.
So I think with the message of Remember Pearl Harbor, I know at the museum, the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum, we try to send that message, but in a message of peace and reconciliation now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
we look through history, learn from the mistakes of the past to try to move towards a more peaceful future. And hopefully the younger generation, thanks to you and Daniel for continuing to promote that message. We have another question, and it's kind of in line with continuing to promote the message of peace and reconciliation. Will there be an 80th anniversary? Do you think? I'm trying to see who that question is from, but yes.
Well, Monica, have you started your planning?
I guess I could answer that question as yes. We're starting to plan already.
Oh, I just hope so. I mean, and I hope you've started your planning. Daniel, you're right there in Hawaii.
Right. Well, the anniversary this year will be virtual.
Right.
And as we move past the pandemic, hopefully, soon, we can't even guarantee that will happen next year. But every year it will be remembered, and remembered by our partners, the United States Navy and the Park Service that does this ceremony. And so we will have a virtual one, and you can certainly go online to watch it. But these are times that are very trying for all of us. But the memory of Pearl Harbor will be remembered. We will remember Pearl Harbor this year, and we will remember every year. That's part of what we're charged with. And the good people that I work with will be moving towards this and planning it and working. I know they're working with the Navy right now on that. And so we will have a virtual one. And hopefully next year, maybe we won't. We'll have one in person, but time will tell.
So that was
hopefully we will, and you all come. And this year, do watch it virtually. It will start at 7:50 Hawaii time. So just adjust that for wherever you are in the world. And that's only a couple of weeks away. So I hope you will watch on December 7th. And I so appreciate all of the questions and this opportunity, and for all of you being here.
Yes, and same for us. We thank our viewers for spending so much time with us here today and to listen to a different perspective on the attack on Pearl Harbor. We hope to promote the message of peace and reconciliation to all generations, and we continue to do this through the great opportunities we find through Dorinda Nicholson, her family, the stories, the DVDs, and all of the resources that they've created, and through, of course, Daniel Martinez and the wealth of knowledge that he brings from the Pearl Harbor National Memorial. The personal accounts that both of you have shared are really valuable to see how we can find peace and reconciliation despite being in adverse conditions. For our viewers, if you have just come and maybe you didn't see the whole program, please check back on our website and we'll have a video recording of this program in case you missed any part of it or if any of your friends would like to see it. We have also that we're going to share with you in email and online is a resource of books, movies, films, websites for further study if you're interested in this topic and want to learn more. And also one request from the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum is if you have enjoyed this program, please consider a donation. We can use any help to continue our programs such as these. So just want to say thank you from all of us. And on behalf of the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum, we thank you so much for joining us today. Aloha and mahalo nui loa.
Aloha, ahui ho.
Aloha.